gut intelligence and how gut intelligence is just as important as IQ and EQ in business. And EQ is emotional intelligence. And yes, gut intelligence does affect our health, and I'll be explaining why. So when I talk about gut intelligence, really what gut intelligence is the wisdom to know the truth and the guts to do something about it. And I'm sure you've all had that ping in your gut where when you've listened to it, you felt very, very powerful and clear and confident. And there's other times you've looked in hindsight and you said, why didn't I listen to that ping in my gut? Well, I've been a coach and consultant for 30 years now, and when I first started my business, I started out doing just more typical training and development on teamwork, sales training, leadership training. And what I found is most of my clients, when they called to engage me to work for them as a coach or consultant, the reason was because they just didn't know what to do. And I'm sure you've all had that experience where your mind is confused and you kind of know, but you don't know, and you want somebody else to be the expert outside of you who gives you the answers. So I started to realize that there was this methodology that I was using to help people to get clear because they truly did know somewhere deep down in their gut. So when people ask me, well, who calls you? What is their need? I say, well, a picture really speaks 1,000 words. So the best way that I can explain about who needs my services is somebody who looks like this. And we've all had that situation, right? You might right now, you might be thinking about a decision you're not quite sure about. You know, maybe it's whether or not is it time to retire, or is it time to grow? Should I hire that employee, or should I sell that property? Or what is it I need to do in my life? And when we don't feel that sense of being clear, calm, and confident, we feel like this. So after people work with my gut intelligence process, they end up feeling like this. They end up feeling like, hey, I got this. And that's a really, truly big and powerful feeling that we have because we're so deeply connected to ourselves. And that just feels great. So what do I do? So what is the gut intelligence process? Really what I do is I come in to businesses and I work with executives and I help them to put the pieces of the puzzle together that they actually already know it's in their mind, but it's scattered and somehow it's not connected. And so it feels more like confusion on the left side of this picture versus clarity, which is the right side of this picture. And I help create that transformation. And you've all had this experience where your gut is saying one thing, your heart is saying something else, and your mind is saying something else. And it feels like a really bad meeting going on inside of you where people aren't really communicating and they're not listening to one another and they're not collaborating. So it's just a lot of chattering in your mind. And oftentimes our heart gets really attached to a situation and it wants it to work. Again, whether that's that relationship or that employee or that property that you were looking at, but yet something in your gut says, no, something is wrong here, but you can't quantify it. So your mind wants to take control and your mind wants to say, okay, let's make a pros and cons list and really look at this in a logical sort of way. But the problem with that is you don't always have all the data that you need because life unfolds, right? And the data changes. You could be in, for example, a financial situation where you have X amount of revenue and suddenly tomorrow you get a phone call and boom, you lost your biggest client. So what was data yesterday doesn't apply to today. So we've all had this situation where hindsight is 20/20 because our gut knew. And I have to admit, you know, we're all a work in progress. So I remember when I started my business 30 years ago, it started to grow. I was on the radio, I was on WISN TV with a radio show, and I was on Smooth Jazz, and I had clients that were referring me, and so I was hiring consultants. And about 22 years ago, I got the Johnson Controls account. And it was a huge national account. I just needed more help. And so growth is wonderful, right? But when you get in a situation where boom, it happens like that, you kind of get in this panic. And I remember putting an ad in the paper and having some consultants come in, and this one gal came in and her resume was perfect. I mean, everything lined up with what I needed. But she walked into the interview and she brought a big box of Kleenex. Not a little couple tissues, but a big box of Kleenex. My gut got And I thought, well, that's kind of odd. Who brings in a big box of Kleenex? And I would say at least 20% of the interview was about talking about her cold and how she couldn't get rid of this cold. And she'd left the interview, and my mind was like, she matches perfectly on this resume and this piece of paper. And I really liked her in my heart, and I really was attached to hiring somebody, but my gut was pinging. Something's wrong here. I thought I'll bring her back for a second interview. So I brought her back for a second interview, and guess what came along with her? The box of Kleenex. And guess what 20% of our conversation was? Of course, it was about how she wasn't feeling well and she couldn't get rid of this cold and all of that. Well, I hired her anyway because I thought I had limited choices. And how often have we done that, where we feel things are so urgent and we think this is all we have? And I didn't want to lose the big account. And she worked out okay. We got the job done and the client was happy. But I was dealing with somebody who, guess what, was always calling in sick. And the person who really had the dis-ease was me, not her, right? And that's what happens when we're not listening to our gut. So it really does go back to gut health. Because research has shown that when we don't listen to our gut, we end up in dis-ease. And all this research says that it leads to every kind of disease you can imagine, because our gut is our immune system. So it's not only what you eat and what you put in your gut, but it's how you treat your gut as an information center. Because our gut has more neurotransmitters, neurons, and hormones than in our head. And our gut has an enteric nervous system that if you don't pay attention to that ping in your gut, it's like it gets clogged. And when it gets clogged, we get into dis-ease. And we know some of the more minor kinds of dis-ease, like sleepless nights. Don't raise your hand if that's ever happened to you, but just smile. Okay, we understand anxiety and depression, right? And it all happens when we have this emotional attachment to something that we really want to work out. I wanted her to work out. I had limited time to get this going. And we all have those reasons we get emotionally attached to something where we feel that time is of the essence and I don't know what to do, and should I do this or should I do that? And we start ignoring the ping in our gut because we don't know how to work with that ping to get greater wisdom, to know the truth and have the guts to do something about it. Now, if we all were honest, we would say that when we have this incongruency between our gut, heart, and head, sometimes we've done some impulsive things. So let's kind of run through those so we can see what we tend to do when we don't have gut intelligence. Sometimes we deny the truth and we put our head in the sand, right? And it's wonderful this way we can deny things, but it doesn't go away. It is what it is. Other times we went with the impulse of our heart. Now that could be buying that car you really wanted but you knew you shouldn't buy, or that relationship you just really wanted to rush ahead in but you're like, the signs were there. And then there's other times that we've made a decision strictly from our head because it was logical and we thought this was the way that we were going to get to the goals that we wanted to get to and get the success we wanted to. But even if we've arrived there, what happened was we weren't satisfied or fulfilled because we didn't engage our gut and our heart in the process. Other times we got stuck in our head and we got stuck in our heart. And when we're stuck in our head, we get into this analysis paralysis kind of thing. And as I mentioned, you can do all the analysis that you want, and today it can make sense, but tomorrow something changes and that data doesn't make sense anymore, right? Or you can get into this Pollyanna positive in your head, and you can practice the techniques from The Secret, thinking that what I think about, I bring about, which positivity I'm all about. But psychologists also call that magical thinking because we're not really grounded in reality of our wisdom. Then there's this other thing where we get in our heart and we get this ping in our gut, and scientists have said we actually get this neurotransmitter that goes all the way to, it's called the amygdala part of our brain, that makes us go into reaction, into fight flight. So we either can flee going, I'm going to procrastinate that because I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do. So if you've procrastinated or you've seen other people procrastinate, it's because they're fleeing from really dealing with the decision, whatever that is. Or somebody's like, that's it, I've had it. And I hear about this all the time in the workplace where somebody takes control and they start forcing change to happen because they just can't stand to wait anymore. So instead of ready, aim, fire, it's fire, fire, fire. Okay? So sometimes do those things work out? Sure. But we end up in a very stressful way of being when we're making decisions like that, which again affect our health. We get high blood pressure, again, sleepless nights, and so on and so forth. So we make decisions this way because we cannot stand the unknown and do not know how to listen within to that inner voice. Nobody's taught us how to do that. And in fact, in our society, there's such a sense of pride about being busy. Think about it. When somebody says to you, how are you? How many times has somebody answered that question and said, oh, I'm so busy? Like that's something to brag about, right? What would happen if somebody said, how are you? And you said, you know what? I have so much time on my hands. It's awesome. Try that once and see how people are shocked. Because in this culture, we really don't value that idea of disconnecting. The moment that we have something void in our schedule, we'll get on social media, right? Instead of just taking a moment and pausing and being with ourselves and pondering and wondering about something. It's because we don't like the unknown. Because when we ponder and we wonder and we get curious, the answers don't come to us right away. And we are a society of instant gratification. So let's talk about this gut intelligence process that I've been doing over the last 30 years. And by the way, I've recently gotten a trademark. I'm so excited, not only on the term, but on the process. And my goal is to really spread the word on what gut intelligence is, how to do it, and how you benefit from it. So gut intelligence, what it is it synthesizes the 3 information centers we have within us, which is our gut, our heart, and our head. And our gut is the information center that simply alerts us. As I mentioned, it has more neurotransmitter, neurons, and hormones than even our head, and it has that enteric nervous system. So all of our subconscious programming in the back of our mind of things we know gets simulated quickly into our gut, and we get a ping. So we'll go back to my interview that I did 22 years ago. Guess what I know now that I did it 22 years ago? Pay attention to all of the nonverbal cues, right? And so now if I see a nonverbal cue, ping, I get a ping and I know exactly what that means. Same thing with relationships. If you've been in relationships, who cares if you're on your second marriage or your third marriage or whatever? I bet you learned from all of that. Or people who are in business and have gone bankrupt, sometimes are the most successful business people because they have this data stored in their subconscious mind, and now when they get that ping in their gut, they trust it. So that's what our gut does, is it helps to alert us, and our heart helps to align us as to what it is that's important to us. Now, to be more conscious of that, what's really important is for you to write down what is your vision, what are your values, and what are your goals. Because if you haven't gone through that exercise of being conscious about that, it's going to be really difficult for you to be able to be in a moment, get a ping in your gut, immediately align to what is important to you, and then make an effective executive decision. So when I go into companies and I say to them, do you have a strategic plan? They go, I go, well, what is it? Well, what do you mean, what is it? Well, what's your vision? Well, I don't know, let me go in the drawer, let me find it. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, if you don't have it memorized, what are your values? Well, I know we got like 6 or 8 of them. Well, what are they? Well, I don't know, let me go in the drawer and figure it out. Well, what are your top 3 to 5 goals? We have a goal around revenue, and we have a goal around, cutting expenses. And I say to the executive team, if you don't have those memorized to heart, how do you think your employees are going to have those memorized? And then when there's a moment of choice and they get a ping in their gut and they've got to make a decision, how are they going to align the decision to what they value most? Don't expect them to do that. If you don't know, they don't know, right? So we have to know what we value in our heart in order to align decisions accordingly, and then our head will assimilate the best solutions for us. Now what happens is when we get that ping, we often go to that amygdala, like I said, that panic place in our brain that goes like this. And we have this quick self-talk that we say to ourselves, I don't know what to do. we have to wipe that self-talk away, and instead what we have to say to ourselves in order to be clear, calm, and confident is we have to say to ourselves, okay, how might I? So no matter what comes your way, you get a call from a client, it's your biggest client, they want to cancel the business. Okay, how might I deal with this? Not, oh my God, what am I going to do? How might I? And when you ask how might I, you bypass that detour to the amygdala and you go right up to the executive part of your brain. And that's why I call it gut intelligence. Because it's really synthesizing the gut, heart, and head, so you have a strong gut-brain axis. That's what it's called, the gut-brain axis. So you look something like this. Think about something that's happened to you in the last 30 days where you got that ping in your gut. Maybe you went into a little bit of a panic. What if you approached it like this with curiosity? And you said, is that interesting? Okay, I wonder, how might I deal with that? How much more effective would you be because you increased your gut intelligence to step into that situation and know how to deal with it? See, there's been some research, and the research was done by Dr. Sarah Laser. And she's a doctor from Massachusetts. And she did some research on executives where she actually took pictures of their brain. And the executives that meditated and did deep breathing, and I don't mean meditating like this for 20 minutes, I'm talking about just worked on their deep breathing for 20 minutes a day. What it did is it changed their brain wave from beta to alpha, but it also created a neural pathway, this gut-brain access to the executive functioning part of the brain. And what she found out as she looked at these pictures of the brain over the course of 30 days is the amygdala, the center of fight-flight, actually shrunk. So it's almost as though prior there was a 4-lane highway going to the amygdala, fight-flight. And by doing this deep breathing for 30 days, for 20 minutes a day, it's almost like that became a dirt road and this became a 4-lane highway. And I know in our culture that's so hard because you're like, oh, what could I all get done in 20 minutes when I'm sitting there breathing, right? But what if by doing that actually helped you to build this highway between your gut and your head that made you more effective in the moment so your decisions were more clear, calm, and confident? So I'm wondering, what's your question that you've been wondering about? Because we all have one. Is it personal in nature? What should I do about my job, my relationship? Maybe you're dealing with something at home with a child. Is it work nature? How do I grow my business? How do I get connected with so-and-so? What's your question that you've been wondering about? And are you ready to own it, ask it, and voice it? Because I'd like to show you just a quick little exercise before we're done here that can really help you listen to your inner voice. That sound good? Okay, awesome. So it's called the STOP technique, and this is in my book, the Align book that I have here today, and I'll tell you about that in a moment. So all you have to do is this. I'm not somebody who really believes in sitting in a yoga pose with my fingers like this to do the deep breathing. I actually do it in my car. And I don't turn my radio on anymore, and I do my STOP technique then, or I do it in between meetings, or when I'm waiting on hold, where I used to get stressed out, on a phone call or in a lobby for a client, I do the STOP technique. So I want you all to right now just slow down. STOP stands for slow down and breathe. Tune in within is the T. O is observe what is happening, and perceive is perceive a new possibility. So we're going to get you connected, okay? So you can keep your eyes open or closed, it doesn't really matter, but I want you all to just breathe to your chest right here, because this is where most of us breathe. When we breathe right here, we're in the beta brain wave part of our functioning of our brain, so just breathe right here. We also, when we breathe here, there's a corpus callosum in our brain, and it doesn't open up. It's not very efficient, so we're going to breathe more deeply to shift from beta to alpha brain wave and to open up that corpus callosum. So now breathe right to this part of the top part of your belly. So just take a breath through your nose, out your mouth, and just relax into it. Go as slow as you can. And I do this sometimes when I'm in a meeting and people are arguing over things. I'm the one who sits back and I do the breathing, and it's amazing how everybody comes down. Okay? Now breathe right to this part of your diaphragm, right in the center. And breathe in your nose and out your mouth, and just notice, let your shoulders relax down into your breath. Oh, does that feel good? I can feel it coming down already. Okay, perfect. Now I want you to breathe right into the core of your belly. There's a vagus nerve, again, that goes from the belly through the heart, through the head. So we're getting down into the belly so we can pull all those neurons, neurotransmitters, and neurons up to your top of your head, okay? So breathe right into that core 2 more times. Deep breath through your nose, out your mouth. Slow as you can go. Good job. Excellent. Now what I want you to do is just tune into yourself for a moment with one more breath. And I want you to tune in and ask yourself, what is your how might I question? What have you been wondering about? How might I what? Just tune in. You know what it is that you've been wondering about. No one's going to hear your question. Now I want you to take one more breath into the belly, and we're going to observe what's happening. What I want you to do is look up to the right side of your mind's eye, and there's a picture there, or maybe there are words. It's up in your mind's eye. And this is what's happening around your question right now. So this is creating consciousness so you can get a clear picture of what's happening. It would be like me seeing Betty with the Kleenex box. I want you to look up to the right side of your mind's eye, and that's what's currently happening around your question. I want you now to turn to your left ear and listen in your inner ear. There might be a still small voice there that tells you what's currently happening around your question. This is your gut synthesizing all those unconscious cues that you have not put those pieces of the puzzle together yet. And take one more deep breath into your belly and ask yourself, what do I know for sure is currently happening right now that I need to pay attention to, that I need to know as I consider this decision? What do I know for sure? And look down into your gut. Take a deep breath. Now we're going to perceive a possibility, and this is the possibility for you of what you need to do. Now go back to your how might I question. This is what you're wondering about, what you should do. Look up to the right side of your mind's eye again, and there's some words or a picture of what it is you need to do around your question. Again, your gut is synthesizing all this information with your head brain to help you know what you need to consider. How might I? What do you need to do? What do you need to consider? This is bringing a possibility to you that you hadn't thought of before. Now listen into your left ear. There's a still small voice there that's telling you what you need to consider. How might I what? What are you hearing as advice, as wisdom? And finally, take that last deep breath into your gut and say to yourself, what do I know for sure?